Okay. Hi, my name is Nicole Kuna. I am in a CCJ 1010 class, which is Intro to Criminology, and my midterm presentation is going to be on white collar crime. What is white collar crime? White collar crime is fraud that is committed by big corporations, businesses, or government professionals. Their motivation is always to have some sort of financial gain or to avoid losing any money or property or services. It's always to secure any type of personal business advantage, something that is going to benefit them. White collar crime is never violent. It's mostly just lying or not being upfront with information that they're giving to their clients or anyone that follows them in this case. Um, the person that termed the term The person that coined the term white collar crime was Edwin Sutherland. He was a criminologist and sociologist in the 1930s, I believe. At the time, he was publishing a book about white collar crime, which ended up getting sued by many of America's largest companies. Um, uh, the people that wanted the lawsuit were the companies because what they were suing for was for the book to get heavily censored. At that point, many people that would read it wouldn't even know what it is that the companies were doing at that time. Society, when that book was published, never thought of people in the upper class that were in charge of big companies like that were already rich. They were never thought that those people would commit any sort of crimes. They always thought of people of respectability, and they were looked up to by everyone. Everyone thought that those who committed crimes were only gangsters, and those were at the bottom of the social status. So Edwin Sutherland then broke the news to everyone that that was not true. There are many types of white collar crime, but I'm only going to be talking about corporate fraud, money laundering, and securities and commodities fraud. Corporate fraud is one of the FBI's highest criminal priorities next to domestic crime or any violent crime, terrorism. It's up there with all of those. Corporate fraud includes insider trading, which is basically any stock that is bought or sold knowing that is going to be successful, which is basically just information that is not known to the public. In the stock world, just telling someone, "Hey, you should buy this specific stock," is illegal. You can't be telling anyone. So insider trading is mostly that, just information that isn't known to the public. Only some people know it, and then they'll benefit from buying whatever stock that it is that they're talking about. Kickbacks is, for example, let's say a large drug company goes to a certain doctor and they'll say, look, we have this new drug for you. Every prescription that you give to one of your not clients, to your patients, any prescription that you give one of your patients of this drug, you're gonna get commission for it. So obviously the doctor, even though let's say the patient doesn't really need it, he's gonna be prescribing it for it, knowing that he's gonna be making money. So that is kickbacks. Misuse of corporate property for personal gain, individual tax violations related to self dealing or corporate fraud. Um, Sorry, my bad. Uh, Corporate fraud always means that billions of dollars are going to be lost because these corporations are so big. They have many more victims to get to themselves. A lot of this money is never even gained by the victims, even though the corporations are caught. At that point, all of the money that they gained has already been wasted and put into other businesses or spent on luxury items. So there's no way to recover that money and give back. An example of corporate fraud is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo in 2008, when the economy was at one of its low points, Wells Fargo employees were expected to open a lot of credit cards and they had high sales expectations by their supervisors. And so many employees felt pressured because they were being threatened that if they did not meet these expectations, that they would be fired and they would lose their job. So then one or two people then began to open credit cards under their customers' names without the customer being um, informed that these credit cards were being opened under their names. So they were being opened fraudulently, essentially. And Little by little, when these two employees started doing that, obviously, since they were reaching more sales, they were making more money. And little by little, all of the Wells Fargo employees then began to do the same. At one point, many many of the employees began to feel guilty. Many of them testified that they were being pressured a lot because the people that did not want to open these accounts unethically, then whenever they would try to open these accounts the right way, they weren't able to. And at that point, they were being threatened that, oh, you're going to lose your job. So they had no other choice but to do it the wrong way, the way that everyone else was doing. But the problem was that many of their supervisors, their managers, they knew what was going on with their employees, and they knew that many accounts were opened without the account owner knowing so. But the managers didn't care because at the end of the day, they gained. They got more money because their employees were meeting high sales quotas. So there was no problem on their end until, of course, they got caught. By 2011 through 2015, company employees opened more than 1.5 million bank accounts. They applied over 565,000 credit cards in customers' names unauthorized. But once it got caught in 2016, Wells Fargo was fined a combined total of $185 million for fraudulent activity, and then the CEO resigned. After Wells Fargo got caught, um, 5,300 employees were fired, and then hundreds, if not thousands, of clients were lost. After that, Wells Fargo then tried to reconstruct the way that their company was set so that employees wouldn't feel so pressured to meet these basically unreachable sales expectations, because many employees said that that was impossible what they were asking for. So they had no. That's why it led them to commit these things. But then Wells Fargo tried to reconstruct their company and try to make it not so much about sales, but more about customer service and treating the customers and so on and so forth. Money laundering is next. Money laundering is turning dirty money, which is essentially just money that was obtained illegally. They try to spread it amongst either businesses, restaurants, or just purchases, try to make it look clean. So try to make it look like the money that they obtained illegally was obtained legally. There are three steps in the money laundering process. So the three steps are placement. Placement is when you first get the money. So that could be either from drug trafficking, human trafficking, organ trafficking, terrorism, whatever it may be, as long as it's illegal and you gain that money through there. That's what placement is. Then layering is when you get that money that you gained illegally, and then you spread it amongst businesses or restaurants, or you make high-end purchases. You basically spread it throughout different places to make it look like you gained that money through those places and not through drug trafficking or organ trafficking. Step three is then integration, which is once you gain the money, the clean money, then you can spend it on whatever it may be. So usually they'll spend it on real estate or jewelry or expensive cars. What else? On NFTs or Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. That's the word I was looking for, or cryptocurrency. Yes, so with money laundering, they'll gain money through either healthcare fraud, human trafficking, international and domestic public corruption, drug trafficking, or terrorism. And then what they'll do is that the tools that they'll use to launder this money are financial institutions such as banks. An example was a Danske Bank. I believe it was a German bank. There was this Russian mob that went to the bank and they were just saying, hey, like, I need to put $200 billion in this account and I'll give you a cut. So then the Densuke branches basically just not impose their rules and regulations on these people, because as with any bank, if you put, let's say, $20,000 into a bank in one day, you're going to get a call and you're going to say, hey, like, is something going on? And it, in case of any suspicious activity, it's going to get reported to the authorities. But what the Danske branches did is that they agreed, and they'll be like, okay, we won't say anything, and we're not going to put these rules on you. So that way, all the money that they were putting inside the banks, they never got reported to the authorities, and no one ever knew until later on. International trade is another way to launder money. Precious metals like jewelry, real estate, so they'll buy property, or virtual currency. An example of a very famous, infamous money launderer is Al Capone. Al Capone was a mobster. He was born in New York to Italian immigrant parents, and he was very famous throughout the 1930s, I believe. He laundered over $1 billion through various businesses. So he was a very famous mobster, which would participate in prostitution or drug smuggling, tax evasion, extortion, murder, all the money that he would gain from drug smuggling and prostitution. He then opened several laundromats that were used in which the customers were only able to use cash. And then he would say, oh, well, I gained all this money from my laundromats, obviously, not from the drug smuggling. When he did get caught, although he probably would have faced a life sentence if it was for all of the crimes that he committed, they only found enough evidence for tax evasion. So he was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Securities and commodities fraud. So, securities and commodities fraud is basically misrepresenting information to the public in order to make a profit. So, the creation of complex investment vehicles and the grand increase of money being invested have created greater opportunities for individuals and businesses to create fraudulent investment schemes. Some securities and commodities fraud include like Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes. Those are usually the most popular ones. An example of securities and commodities fraud is Elon Musk's $20 million tweet. In August 2018, Elon Musk had around 22 million followers on Twitter. Um, One day he just tweeted randomly that he could take Tesla at an inflated price of $420 per share. And he said that he had secured the funding already for such transaction. Obviously, many of the 22 million followers that he has on Twitter are going to read that tweet and say, oh, he's going to raise up the price somehow. So many people then go and they buy their stock on Tesla thinking, oh, I'm going to get rich because the stock is going to go up and then I'm going to be able to cash out and we're going to have so much money. And everyone starts going to Tesla and they start buying stock, which leads it obviously very greatly disrupts the market. And that led to Tesla's share to increase to 7%. Then the Securities and Exchange Commission performed an investigation and found that the funding that he said was secured in his tweet never happened. That was a complete lie on his part. So that is an example of how the misrepresentation of information uh, that he put to the public, he misrepresented whatever happened. Not even misrepresented. He completely lied, saying that the funding was secured. So then, in turn, people believed that, and then they went to go buy his stock. So when they found that no funding had occurred, he then had to agree to pay $20 million in fines and then step down as chairman of his company. In conclusion, white collar crime is very prevalent, especially nowadays, and it's only becoming more and more popular. Um, Although there does not have to be any violence involved, it does not mean that there are no victims. Many people, they put their life savings, for example, in the test with the Elon Musk situation, people put their entire life savings into the stock just for it to be um, a lie, and they end up losing a lot of their lives. Not only Tesla, but there's another situation. People just end up putting their entire life savings, or they get their money gets stolen by these companies. It's just one single scam to destroy a company or wipe out entire families' savings, or cost investors billions of dollars in a road. And then at the end of the day, the general public is just not going to be able to trust higher institutions because crimes like these happen so often. So that is my presentation on white collar crime. Thank you.